Welcome. My name is Lori Dorman, and I am here on behalf of the Manatee County Bar, and I want to thank you all very much for coming. I'm going to speak very briefly, and I'm going to introduce our panelists and our judges who are here. I want to specifically thank the many judges from the 12th Judicial Circuit, current and retired, who are here. Thank you so much for coming. I want to thank Scott Westheimer here for being here. He's our representative to the Florida Bar Board of Governors. In February of last year, I was fortunate enough to attend the Heschel King Breakfast in Sarasota. This breakfast is in honor of Black History Month, and it recognized the strong friendships between the Black community and the Jewish community. One of the defining moments in that friendship was when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was joined on the march in Selma by Rabbi Abraham Heschel. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit choked up. This event was something really special. One of the things in the event was a slideshow, and they showed some things that, as you can tell by the way I'm getting choked up, were really disturbing. Signs, lynchings, things that just really, really upset me. And they made me sad. And then I got even sadder when I thought about what was going on in our community and in our nation. That the Black Lives movement, that Black Lives Matter, and that movement needed to be around in 2016 and in 2017. Because we hadn't done enough to bridge that racial divide. The breakfast wasn't just sad, though. The breakfast made me really hopeful. And one of the reasons it made me hopeful was that Judge Charles Williams was the honoree at this breakfast. And there are a lot of people who recognize that we have work to do. And happily for me, I'm a member of the Manatee County Bar, and the Manatee County Bar agreed that we as a bar have work to do. And the first step that we're taking as a bar is to set up our own diversity and inclusion committee. And I'm fortunate enough to have been selected as the chair of that committee. The divides that separate us don't need to be there. But in order to recognize those divides and to figure out how to get past them, we need to do something. And with the help and the leadership of the Manatee County Bar, the judges and the lawyers of the 12th Judicial Circuit, and our very wonderful panelists here, we're ready to take that first step. Our presenters today are going to talk briefly about themselves. But before they do that, I want to personally thank them and introduce them as a group. So we have the Honorable Judge Charles Williams of the 12th Judicial Circuit, the Honorable Claudia Isom out of Hillsborough County, the 13th Judicial Circuit. We have retired Judge Karimu Hill Harvey. She's a mediator in our circuit, and we are so fortunate to have her. And we have Alan Perez of the Millard Law Firm, and they're going to be our panel today. So you've seen me get choked up. Now you're going to see me get excited because I'm going to turn the mic over to Judge Charles Williams.
First of all, I want to thank all of you for appearing today. And it's understandable how Lori could be so emotional over the subject. I'm often asked, you know, you spend a lot of time dealing with issues of diversity and bias and inclusion. You know, how do you get started in terms of that conversation? It's very difficult because it's very uncomfortable for people to talk about some of these issues. And one of the problems is, I think, that we discuss these issues in stark terms of black and white. And that is probably the biggest mistake, because it's not just black and white. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, we're talking about a gamut of different things that include everything from race, ethnicity, religion, sexuality, sexual preference, gender. We're even including age, and as I get older, age discrimination is becoming a bigger factor for me. And veterans issues, because there is discrimination against veterans. So we want to broaden this whole idea, this whole concept of diversity and inclusion. And so when people think about it, when you see the subject matter, immediately you start thinking in terms of black and white, because of the obvious issues that we have had as a country for about 400 years. It's broader than that. What's the responsibility of the courts and the judiciary? I think is to be reflective of what our society is. One of the things that we want to make certain happen is that we ensure the public that the judiciary and the criminal justice system and the civil justice system is not to be influenced by issues of bias and prejudice. We have to constantly ensure the public that that image on the statue of the blindfold of justice is actually in effect. That's very difficult to do in the historical context because of all of the recorded instances of misjustice, whether it was criminal misjustice or civil misjustice. And that is a history that we have to acknowledge. That's a history that we accept. But it's also something that we have to work diligently to improve upon. So I see the role of the courts and the judges here is to constantly assure the public that we are working towards truly a colorblind system. We're not there yet, and it's probably going to be a work in progress probably forever, but we will continue and diligently work on it. We also have to include the idea that just on a practical level, we have to learn to accommodate differences. And that is everything from making sure that our courtrooms are ADA compliant, making sure that people who do not speak English as a first language are able to have interpreting services, that the documents and the paperwork is done in a way that accommodates people who do not read English very well. And so we are constantly working on that, and we're constantly doing things to make certain that people who come to the courthouse, even though they may not speak English as a first language, will be able to be accommodated. In that same way, in that same vein, as judges, we have to also be ambassadors to the court system. And I appreciate the judges that are here, and I appreciate the judges who have worked in the community to spread the word about the justice system and spread the word about some of the things that we're doing, especially here in the 12th Judicial Circuit. I'm very proud to be a part of the Sarasota County Bar Association's Diversity Committee. I'm also now very proud to be a part of the Manatee County Bar Association's Diversity Committee, as if I had a choice. But these are the types of things that as judges and people who work in the court system know that we have to do. We can't just make it a 8-to-5 job at the courthouse. We have to go out into the community and assist people in understanding that we are a work in progress, and we want to make certain that the justice system is fair to all. And so when we talk about things like making certain that we have forms that are able to be read in Spanish and English, that may not sound like a huge thing to us. But for those who don't speak English, but understand that the criminal and the civil justice system is important, it really is a big deal. When we talk about being ADA compliant, you know, it's not a big deal for those of us who don't have to worry about finding a parking space or having a wheelchair accommodating courtroom, but to those who need that, it is a major, major deal. And so when we talk about bias and inclusion and diversity, don't think in terms of black and white. Think in terms of all of us as a people and all of us who have different things that actually qualify us as being diverse and being different. Again, I appreciate Lori setting this up, and I think it's important that we have an open mind as we go forward this afternoon. When I first talk to people about diversity and inclusion, I'm often asked by them, well, it's not particularly relevant, especially after 2008 when we elected an African American president. Why is this even relevant? Why do you even want to talk about that? Why do you even want to bring this up? And many people think it's divisive to talk about it. But again, that closed mind thinks in terms of black and white, and it's more than that. Those of you who read the papers know that, just having issues such as whether or not you should have transgender bathrooms has become a big, big deal. If you're from the state of North Carolina, you may lose millions of dollars just because in North Carolina, that is an issue. And so it's not so far removed to say that those won't become issues here and those won't become issues elsewhere, because we have to understand why that's a big deal to some people. And so we hope that you get from today's initial discussion a broader sense, a broader idea of why this is such an important issue. And for that, I thank Lori, and we will get started. Is that correct? Do you want Judge Isom to take over at this point? Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Lori, for making the invitation for us to be part of this. I'm Judge Claudia Isom, and along with Alan Perez, we are members of the Supreme Court Standing Committee on Fairness and Diversity. So we are really excited to be part of this, and behold, I bring you good tidings of fairness. One thing about implicit bias, it is a new way of looking at an old problem. We've been doing this actively since 2007. In 2007, our Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court decided that we needed to do more to follow up on some Florida bar studies on both race and gender. And so they created a program where every court in this state, every state court, had a diversity committee. And I was the judge member of the 13th Judicial Circuit. So since 2007, I've been helping present one-day programs so all of our judges could have this training. And so all of our judges have at least one full day of training on diversity. And in the early days, we talked a lot about cultural competence. We talked about diversity awareness. We played games. We threw balls of yarn at each other and got to know each other a lot better. But at the end of the day, we decided that what we were doing might make us feel better about ourselves, but what we really needed to do was work on the public perception. We want the public to understand our commitment to justice is not just lip service. And as we all know, everybody has good intentions, but good intentions don't make justice happen. So we were lucky enough to get a grant to have a Professor Rachel Godsill come down. She's a law professor at Seton Hall, and she's also co-founder of a group called the Perception Organization. So if we can start our slideshow now. I'm kind of a groupie. You can go on YouTube and you can go on the internet and you can find Professor Godsill giving a program very much like this, because when she came down with the grant money, she gave us permission to use her materials. And so she presents on the science of decision making, and especially the science of decision making in terms of how it impacts judges. And it impacts all of us, so all of this is relevant to our daily walk. And so let's get started. Professor Godsill came down and trained us on implicit bias, and I will go on. Okay, let's go back to the swallow. Okay, so in 1990, before, I guess that's the year I was running for judge, the first report came out on the Race and Ethnic Bias Commission presented. And this quote was used in the front of their report. A swallow had built her nest under the eaves of a court of justice. Before her young ones could fly, a serpent gliding out of his hole ate them all up. When the poor bird returned to her nest and found it empty, she began a pitiful wailing. A neighbor suggested, by way of comfort, that she was not the first bird to lose her young. True, she said, but it's not just that I mourn my little ones, but that I should have been wronged in that very place where the injured fly for justice. And that's what we're talking about. When people come to our courthouse, they're entitled to find justice. The courthouse should be a safe place. And no matter how we feel and what we think, we have to be concerned about what they perceive when they walk through our door. And we try to make it convenient. ADA, I was in the probate division for a while, and these people were about half an hour late for court, and I said, "Where have you been? We've got parking places." Well, the parking places were in the parking ramp, the first floor, very convenient if you know they're there. But they had driven right by them, assuming that that was for, I guess, more privileged people. And the second floor has a lip from where you park your car to get up to the elevator. And then when you get downstairs from the elevator, you've got to take your wheelchair across the path of traffic. So those people, before they even got to our door, were really upset. So think about, what are we doing to make people feel safe when they come to our courthouse? When they walk through the door, do they see people who look like them? Do they see signs that say, like I was saying over in Pinellas, you can't even take in your manicure scissors. You get frisked like you're going to the airport, maybe even more so. Once you get through security, is there signage that says where you should go when you get there? Is there a sign that says no shirt, no shoes, no service? We actually, Judge Estrada, who's the chair of our committee, has a story about how a retired judge from up north was sent home because he had the temerity to show up in Sebring, Florida in a Hawaiian shirt and cargo shorts. He was not appropriately attired for court. So think about all of these things, because you know we work here. We are in our safe place. The judges, I even get to take a different elevator and I have an assigned parking place. So it's really hard for me to empathize and walk a mile in the shoes of the people that come in front of me, but we have to worry about that. We have to worry about, is the public perceiving justice? When they look at the judge, does the judge look anything like them? Is the judge mad at them? Did the judge just issue a capias for them because it took them a while to get through that line that snaked around the block? Do they have to worry about getting that capias recalled? Do they have to worry about how do they sign in? Is anybody going to call their case? What's wrong with them anyway? Why won't the judge call their case? Is it because they have a public defender and their case isn't as good as the cases where people have private attorneys? So anyway, we have to think about all of those things. We have to practice empathy, even if maybe we aren't supposed to be practicing sympathy. We have to practice empathy and address how the public perceives our court. All right, so let's get started with the next one. Now we're on to the science part, which is really ironic. I actually have a bachelor's in science because at the University of Iowa, if you only took a year and a half of a foreign language, you got a bachelor's of science in education. If I'd taken 2 whole years of a foreign language, I would have gotten a Bachelor of Arts. So here I am, a scientist here. And please bear with me, I am not a social scientist and I am not an economist like some of our thought experts are, but I'm going to do my best to bring this message to you so we can all kind of understand why our express actions may not be our expressed intentions. Okay, so let me go back. I think we need another slide here. Okay, we tell our jurors to keep an open mind. So today we're going to try to learn about how can we keep an open mind. By using science to understand the decision-making process, hopefully we'll understand more about explicit bias, implicit bias, stereotype threat, and racial anxiety. Who can tell me what explicit bias is? Has anybody ever been to a really old courthouse with 2 sets of bathrooms and 2 sets of water coolers? All right, that would be more explicit, right? Okay, implicit bias, as defined, is the automatic association people make between groups of people and stereotypes about those groups. Under certain conditions, these automatic associations will influence behavior, making people respond in a biased way, even when they are not overtly prejudiced. Stereotype is like a self-fulfilling prophecy. When we worry that our behavior may confirm stereotypes about a group we belong to, our attention splits between the task at hand and our anxieties, often causing us to behave in ways that confirm the very stereotype at the root of those anxieties. Racial anxiety refers to heightened levels of stress and emotion that we confront when interacting with people of other races. People of color may experience concern that they'll be the subject of discrimination and hostility. White people, meanwhile, worry that they'll be assumed to be racist. Studies have shown that interracial interaction can cause physical symptoms of anxiety, and that our nonverbal behaviors, like making eye contact, using welcoming gestures or a pleasant tone of voice, for example, can be affected as well. When everyone in a conversation is anxious that it'll turn negative, it often does. This causes a kind of feedback loop where the fears and anxieties of both white people and people of color are confirmed by everyday reactions. We're still on this slide. I used to be on a bar committee, which I think is now renamed, and the chair of that committee kept calling me Judge-ism. Oh my goodness, it is so hard when you're a judge to try to remember the correct pronunciation of people's names. But I figured by the 3rd or 4th meeting he would have figured out that I was an ism, mesum, usum, right? He kept calling me ism. And because I've been involved in this effort for a long time, I really kind of resented the fact that he just couldn't remember how to pronounce my name. So fortunately, I was able to kind of disconnect and take him by his actions and not by his words. But let's talk about isms. Somebody give me an ism. Why would I not want to be called Judge-ism? This is the audience participation portion. Racism, that's a good one. Anybody else? Sexism, yes. I'm on a committee for that too. All right. Well, I'm reading a book called White Trash right now. Anybody think of another ism? There's classism. There's, you were going to say that one, weren't you? Okay. All right, you got another one? Okay. All right, so there's a lot of isms. And anti-Semitism, and I think we mentioned ageism. Yeah, okay. And so all of these kind of isms get in the way of fair justice. So when we talk about racism and all of these other isms, it's a belief directed against somebody of a group based upon the belief that your own group is superior to theirs. Kind of like when my kids have to breathe a huge sigh of relief when I ask them to remote into the computer because I can't figure out how to do something. You know, yeah, they may be superior to me in technological skills. I'm going to have to give them that. But racism is when you say, it doesn't matter if I went to Harvard or I went to community college, I'm better than that person over there because I'm either white, I'm a different gender, they're a Yankee and I'm not. I had a little bit of that when I first married into my family that I'm part of now. So it's just saying for something that you can't lay claim to because you didn't do it, It happened to you. You were born to those people. But you're going to say, I'm the one. I'm better than they are. They're going to have to work harder than me to prove to me that they're as good as I am. So that is an ism, and I did not want to be an ism. Institutions can be isms as well. They can be racist, they can be sexist, they can be all of those other bad things whenever they bring into their practices policies that result in the exclusion of a particular group based upon those type of categories. We tell our jurors to keep an open mind. We need to do the same thing. Let's see. Next. All right. What the research shows, children as young as 3 months old have been found to have a bias towards women who are the same race as themselves. At 6 months, researchers say infants can classify faces into 3 groups: Caucasian, African, and Asian. They found that by 9 months of age, infants not only distinguish racial categories, but also become less able to tell different individuals apart if they're a member of a less familiar race. For example, white infants can identify white faces as belonging to individual white people, but they're less likely to see people of other races as individual people. So we see that in criminal, right? You know, with the identifications, he was definitely black, and he had on blue jeans and a white t-shirt. That narrows it down. Next. Okay, study after study shows race, ethnicity, and gender do make a difference in the administration of justice. In this perception of fairness study that was conducted for the Florida court system in 2008, 70% of non-Hispanic whites think that Florida courts treat whites and minorities alike. 19% of non-Hispanic whites have seen or experienced unfair treatment on the basis of race or ethnicity. 43% of minorities think that Florida courts treat whites and minorities alike. 47% of minorities have seen or experienced unfair treatment on the basis of race or ethnicity. And what's interesting in those studies, Judge Brownell, is the jurors really usually like us, right? They usually think that everybody's being treated same. So the jurors are perceiving fairness, but the people who are our clients don't necessarily feel that way. Next. Does this mean that we're racist? Okay, social science research demonstrates that one does not have to be a racist with a capital R, or one who intentionally discriminates on the basis of race to harbor implicit racial biases. More than 30 years of research in neurology and social and cognitive psychology have shown that people hold implicit biases even in the absence of heartfelt bigotry, simply by paying attention to the social world around them. Implicit racial bias has given rise to a phenomenon known as racism without racist, which can cause institutions or individuals to act on racial prejudices even in spite of their good intentions and non-discriminatory policies or standards. Next. All right, and this is where if you have a background in neurology or psychology, you probably could give this slide a lot better treatment than I'm going to give. But this is the iceberg. This is Freud's iceberg, and I think some other famous psychiatrists use it as well. And this is supposed to stand for the proposition that what's going on in our mind is largely submerged. It's like the Titanic. You know, we can run up or run aground an iceberg that we don't even know is in our subconscious. Our subconscious provides a lot of these hardwired prejudices, feelings, beliefs based upon who we are, where we grew up, and who raised us. But the fact that it's in our subconscious doesn't mean that it stays there. So today you're getting the opportunity to address your implicit biases so that you can explicitly do something about it. And I don't know about you, but I hate going to a program where they tell me about something really horrific, like children being sold into into really bad situations, and you walk out and they don't give you anything to do about it besides feel bad. So we're going to try to give all of you something to do about it besides just say, ain't that a shame? Okay, so we're going to talk about this. So Freud in the 1900s developed a topographical model of the mind where he describes the features of the mind's structure and function. He used the analogy of an iceberg to describe these levels of the mind. The unconscious mind comprises mental processes that are inaccessible to consciousness but can influence judgments, feelings, or behavior. Let's see, the preconscious contains thoughts and feelings that a person's not currently aware of, but which can easily be brought to conscience and exist just below the level of consciousness. It's kind of like what Freud calls the mind's waiting room. This is what we mean in everyday use of the word available memory. So, for example, you may not presently be thinking about your mobile telephone number, but once I mention it, you can say, oh yeah, that's my number. But you don't have to keep it up here at the top level. The conscious mind, which consists of all the mental processes of which we are aware, and this is called the tip of the iceberg. So that's what's up out of the water. So what we're worried about running aground on our path to justice here is what's below the water. Next. Okay, this is a fun one. So my assistant here is going to push the button. Let's take a test, not yet. It's called the Stroop task or test. It's a psychological test of our mental vitality and flexibility. The task takes advantage of our ability to read words more quickly and automatically than we can name colors. If a word is printed or displayed in a color different from the color it actually names, for example, if the word green is written in blue, ink will say the word green more readily than we can name the color in which it's displayed, which in this case is blue. In terms of overcoming implicit bias to create an explicitly fair workplace or system of justice, the Stroop test has valuable lessons about how we consciously overcome our implicit biases, but more about that later. Okay, so everybody, let's say it out loud. This is a participatory part of the thing. We're going to say the color of the text, not the word, okay? All right, so let's do it. Next. Blue. Next. Red. Next. Green. Next. Next, 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 next. Okay, there you go. And now you guys all know what the implicit association test is based on, because this Stroop test we'll be talking about later. Okay. All right, this test is called the selective attention test, and the first thing you're going to do is keep your fingers crossed that our link works, and then this is the one we're going to have the microphone. We didn't warn people we needed sound today, so this is just a test. It's a test of our sound system. So we're going to go on to YouTube. Count the passes.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13.
And we got 13.
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
How many people saw the moonwalking bear? All right, so this is actually, look out for cyclists. It could be the same thing. Look out for motorcycles. The two gentlemen that devised this test, they actually did it at their university, and instead of moonwalking bear, they had a gorilla. And about half the people that they would test with would see the gorilla going through, because they would be told, count the passes. And our minds are so good, we can completely disregard that invisible gorilla or that moonwalking bear. So if you guys are interested in these type of things, I do commend to you the book, The Invisible Gorilla, because it has a lot of these things where we fool ourselves into thinking that we notice things that we don't really notice. Like, for instance, in the book they tell you if you're driving and talking on the telephone at the same time, cognitively it's the same as having a beer and getting behind the wheel of your car. You know, and you know, things like that. It's a very compelling book. But again, if I'd told you before you watched it that what you're going to see and asked you if you'd be able to see everything that happened to it, I'm sure most people would say yes, of course. But in reality, at least half of the people who see this never see the moonwalking bear, or in the original test, the gorilla, which I think was maybe breakdancing. Okay, next slide. How is this relevant to diversity and fairness? Ultimately, we all believe that our decisions are consistent with our conscious beliefs, when in fact, our unconsciousness is running the show. Or as another professor says, Professor Iris Bonnet, our minds are stubborn beasts. Even when we embrace a policy and a belief in fairness and non-discrimination, we have to work against our own beliefs and our own instincts to make fairness happen. This training is designed to help you understand about the brain's automatic operations and these implicit biases and how they can impede equality goals, and to translate research-based interventions into best practices that will be useful in your law office or in your courts. Next slide. Okay, believe it or not, our path to equal justice under the law now leads us to the brain, more specifically the limbic system, where the amygdala and the hippocampus are located. Evolution has given us a brain designed for survival. The amygdala is an unconscious processor with connectivity hardwired. Implicit memory, physical reaction, and emotional responses store more effectively, vivid and strong, but not always accurately. These responses bypass the wisdom of more advanced brain regions. Think of a bull charging a matador waving a red cape. The red cape is actually no threat to that bull. Actually, the bull's only threatened if he does charge the cape. Ironically, the bull, when charging the cape, puts himself in danger. When you have an immediate emotional reaction, such as fear, disgust, anger, and anxiety, this is experienced in your amygdala. All of these emotional responses can be controlled more effectively once we understand physical reaction and the emotional responses are not fact-based, are not objective, and can mislead us into making bad decisions. Next. Okay. All right, evidently I have no notes for this slide, or else I reshuffled them. So the subconscious mind uses these processes, as you can see, and as I said, Judge Brownell did my faculty training, so he's going, wow, you're never supposed to read the slide. So you guys read the slide, so I won't be guilty of reading the slide to you. All right, next. Categorizing people. I want everybody to shut your eyes and think to yourself, have you ever been called a name? Shut your eyes. When you were called that name, did it have anything to do with whether or not you were a good human being, whether or not you're making a valuable contribution to society, whether or not you deserve to live? And I hope the answer is no. Was a name based on something that you had no control over, like maybe you're not white, maybe you're not a guy, maybe you are a person of color or have an accent because English wasn't your first language? Were those things fair? Should those things affect the quality of justice that you receive when you go to court? I hope everybody agrees no. It shouldn't affect the quality of justice that I receive when I come to court. So when we categorize people, we make judgments about people based upon what they look like, not who they are. Sometimes people choose to present themselves in a manner that makes a statement. I don't know if all the judges have been in criminal court, but I've had people come in wearing that marijuana leaf on their chest, you know? So what message are they giving me? But I grew up in a really small community, and I categorize people sometimes based upon their last name. So I hope none of you guys in here are busters. Any busters here? If you're a buster in my home community, Louisa County, I know that you're smart, emotional, have really short temper, and will always, now I'm going to choke up, have my back in a fight. I also know you're a Democrat. Now, if you were a Gerst, that would be another thing. So in my home community, we all pretty much look the same. We're not all the same gender, obviously, or there wouldn't be any population growth. But we still find ways to discriminate and categorize people. It must be an innate human trait to want to feel superior to somebody else based upon something that we really can't take responsibility for. So when we categorize people, we make them victim of our biases and our prejudices. Okay? I wish you guys could see this, and is there any way you can click on the picture and make the picture bigger? Nope. Okay. All right, this cartoon, if you have a chance to see it, is called Our Daily Walk. In 1993, the Reverend Jesse Jackson was attending a meeting of his organization called Operation Push. He was speaking on the topic of street crime. He said, "There's nothing more painful to me at this stage in my life than to walk down the street and hear footsteps and think about robbery. Then look around and see somebody white and feel relieved." So what does this say about the power of implicit bias when even Reverend Jackson has to be worried about it? So this cartoon, I'll just have to step away. If you see it, it shows the people with kind of like a grocery list. Immediately when they see the other person, black male, not aggressive, wearing a baseball cap backwards, I don't know about that. Mitigating factors, well, he's got on loafers, he can't be that bad. He's whistling sound time. He's got a Federal Express envelope, he's got a good reason to be here. Polo shirt, that's not too scary. And then he's doing the same thing. White, male, he's in the wrong neighborhood. Mitigating factors, white, humming Motown, over 40, and then at the end, at the bottom, they're making their risk assessment. Acceptable? Yeah, they're both acceptable, and so they say good evening. All right, good evening. And we make those same kind of risk assessments when people walk into our court, walk into our law office, walk into our bar luncheon, step up beside us when we're standing in a line. We make that immediate assessment, are they a threat? One thing that we find through this training is that part of the threat is who you hang out with. So if you hang out with people who are more diverse, from different backgrounds, who speak different languages, wear different kinds of clothing based upon their country of origin, you're not going to feel as threatened. So one of the things that you should get out of this training is get out there. You know, when you leave the office and go home, get out there, meet people, go to the movie theater not in your own neighborhood. Go to the grocery store that maybe isn't the one closest to you either. Get out there and mix with people. I know judges, we get invited to all sorts of public forums. And if we know somebody, they're not scary, right? If we know who they are, well, unless they are scary, but we're not going to be scared of them just based upon the fact that they don't look like us when we look in the mirror. Okay, so next slide. This one is, again, about schemas. Schemas are a way that psychologists categorize people. They have given this name to something that we have done for hundreds of years, probably thousands of years, and come up with stereotypes. If you have a positive association with a stereotype, that's called a preference. A negative association is called a prejudice. So, again, I hope you guys can see this. This particular plate from a book is showing a good white woman and a bad woman who wasn't necessarily even considered white at that time. Who wants to guess who the person on the right is? Come on. Audience participation. You can take your nap later.
Someone who's mixed race?
No, not mixed race. You guys all remember phrenology, where they would, like, you know, feel people's heads and decide whether or not you were superior or inferior based upon, you know, how high your forehead was and what shape your head was back in the 1800s. Well, this is from the 1900s. That low down, not so good woman on the right, she's Irish. Any of you guys Irish? Hey, St. Patrick's Day, we're all Irish, right? I heard that on the news. So I'm part Irish, and every wave of migrants in the United States have gotten stigmatized. And all sorts of traits attributed to them. They're not clean, they're breeders, not good people, you wouldn't want to hire them, lazy, no good. But the interesting thing is, and I'm also part German, part Welsh, they all have, I mean, you know, let's be honest, they all have their derogatory terms, right? They've all been looked down upon. Gosh, during World War I, the little town next to my dad's hometown in Iowa changed their name. They changed it to Lincoln. Before World War I, it was Berlin. Donna? Because they were afraid of people attacking their churches. I mean, they still had German Lutheran churches where they taught German. My dad said he was so glad his parents went to the Congregationalist church, because if they'd gone to the German Lutheran church every Saturday, he would have had to go to German class. World War I changed that. So many groups in these United States of America have been stigmatized, ostracized, and stereotyped. But as the good professor says, Professor Godsell, the Irish had something really great happen to them. They became white. They were so white, they even had their own president. So it's interesting, and it's a journey, we're on a journey to fairness. And we have to not stigmatize, ostracize, or prejudge the people that come before us for their full measure of justice. Next. Okay, and then this slide is about, you can have a positive attitude, click, towards somebody. And this is a Dust Bowl era photo, but still have a negative attitude about the group that they belong to, because I don't know, you probably didn't have them in Minnesota, but in Iowa, people get called Okies. And Okies were kind of like white trash, you know. They were people who were not as valuable as the people who owned their own farms and had their own washing machines. All right, next. And again, you can have positive feelings about this woman who obviously is a loving mother, but sit there and think, oh, I bet she lives in a housing project, which is not fair because we don't know anything about her. But we're thinking, probably an unwed mother, she's probably on social benefits. So even though we might have warm and friendly feelings about her, we might project negative stereotypes about her just based upon the fact that she doesn't look like us when we look in the mirror. Right, next. This is a 1920 courtroom in Hillsborough County. And again, we bring to the picture what we see. So those of you who are in the front of the class, I'm going to start calling on some of the people in the back of the class. What do you see in this picture, if you can?
A whole lot of men.
Whole lot of men?
A whole lot of white men.
Whole lot of white men? Well, wait a minute. Yeah, right. Because there's actually only one woman right there. There's only one woman in that courtroom. She's not the judge, she's not the clerk, she's not the court reporter, and in Florida, she sure as heck was not on the jury. I don't think women regularly got on juries until the 1960s. So when I show my Boy Scouts this picture, because I had it hanging in the lobby outside my hearing room, when I show Boy Scouts this picture, they notice such things as the calendar on the wall, the water cooler, the bucket that they think is a spittoon, the grandfather clock behind the judge. They notice all those things, but they don't notice the fact that everybody's a guy, except for that one woman. When I show Girl Scouts this picture, they say the same thing. Wow, there's only one woman in that whole picture. So are my Boy Scouts prejudiced or biased? No, they're just bringing to the equation what they think is unusual because they think it's normal for everybody in the picture to be a guy, right? So we have to look beyond what we think is normal to see if things are happening in a fair way in our courtroom. Okay, and while we're on that one, I just wanted to add, this was the courthouse. It was the Minaret courthouse that was torn down. The next courthouse that was built in the late 50s. It still had segregated bathrooms and water fountains. And E.J. Salcinas, my former boss and a former DCA judge, tells a story about going to the courthouse and sitting in the back of the courtroom and being told to move. And when he asked the bailiff, why do I have to move? He said, you're in the colored section. So, you know, it's not that long ago. And the people that come to our courthouse, their parents or grandparents might have gone to that other courthouse where they were told where they could sit and where they could go to the bathroom or get a drink of water. So we have to realize that people bring a lot to us that we have to work hard to dispel any kind of fears that they have that they're not safe in our courtroom. All right, next. And how are we doing on time? Okay. Was I supposed to be done at 1:15 or 1? Okay. All right, now we're going to talk about the race effect. All right, and again, if you're already aware of this, this is just kind of an objective test of what people bring to the equation. In 2014, a study entitled Written in Black and White, Exploring Confirmation Bias and Racialized Perceptions of Writing Skills, researchers asked themselves the following question. Given findings in a previous study that supervising lawyers are more likely than not to perceive African American lawyers as having substandard writing skills in comparison to their Caucasian counterparts, they asked if confirmation bias unconsciously causes supervising lawyers to more negatively evaluate legal writing by an African American lawyer. And I saw that other YouTube video too. Their words, not my words, okay. They concluded that there are commonly held racially based perceptions about writing ability that unconsciously impact our ability to objectively evaluate even a lawyer's writing. These commonly held perceptions translate into confirmation bias in ways that impact what we see. Because, see, the people who evaluated Tom Meyer, the white guy's paper, said, yeah, he's generally a good writer, has potential, good analytical skills. They found 2.9 of the 7 grammar errors that were in there and 4.1 of the 6 technical writing errors that were in there. But then the control group said, this Tom Meyer is black. Same paper, same exact paper. Their comments were, this guy needs a lot of work, can't believe he went to NYU, average at best. They found a lot more of the spelling and grammar errors and a little bit more of the technical writing errors, because it's kind of like that prove it again theory. You know, people have to prove it again that they really are worthy and good. And so the white guy wasn't having to prove it again. He already had that presumption of being, well, gosh, you went to NYU, and he's got a lot of potential. Might have to work with him a little bit. The other guy, they didn't want to take a chance on because he was going to take too much work. Okay, next. Stereotypes and myths. And again, Judge Brownell would not want me to read the slide to you, so I'm going to let you do that. Mark Twain, an American author and humorist, was best known for his books Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, had a quote for this stereotype and myth situation. He said, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." So this is another situation where they did a study. Most people think, you know, if they were asked, what do you think, there's more young black men in prison or in college of this certain age group? And the majority of the people who responded to the survey said, well, of course they're in prison. But of course they were wrong. There's more young African-American guys going to college that are incarcerated in the United States. And I think it was maybe Milwaukee. It was someplace up in the, what do you guys call that, the northern Midwest? Where they asked people, well, in our town, you know, percentage-wise, when you look at the percentages, are there more white people living in poverty and on food stamps, or more black people living in poverty and on food stamps? And again, the survey responses were, of course there's more black people, there's lots more poor black people, and they're on public assistance. And of course they were wrong. So it's not what you really know, it's what you think you know. And again, this goes back to stereotypes and what we're bringing to our courts. I once had a guy who just couldn't do probation. And I said, you know, wouldn't you rather just, you know, do time served, you know, stay in county maybe a couple of months? You know, and now I feel really rotten about that. Because here I was telling this guy, would you rather be in our local jail? Because I know you're going to get violated time and time again. But to him, no, he'd rather have a few days of freedom out on the streets, having, you know, whatever he considered to be a good time, leading literally a hand-to-mouth existence, than have the convenience of getting his sentence over with. So again, we can't bring what we think is in somebody's best interest to the game, because we have to think, what do they think is in their best interest? And I think some of you guys are in the criminal area, right? You know, you have to think about taking pleas for people who just want to get out of jail. Is that really justice? Saying, well, they might not have done this, but they probably, you know, if they're willing to say they did it, then I'm going to help them get out of jail. And then you have to look at the bond system, because I think, again, there's been studies that some of the bond software is even not fair and unbiased. It presumes people are going to not be able to make bail, or not be able to stay crime-free if they do make bail. So we have to bring to our institutions a microscope, a magnifying glass, and make sure that we're being fair every step of the way, because many times assumptions are where our implicit biases jump in. And again, whenever you pick a jury at the end of the trial, you tell them, you can use reason and common sense. You can use reason and common sense. But some people's reason and common sense is based upon implicit biases. So we need to be careful with that. We need to explain to our juries that they don't need to make a logical leap from the facts to something that the facts might be. in deciding whether or not somebody's met their burden of proof. All right, next. Again, I'm going to start moving faster here. This is about stereotypes. This person says to her friend that she's part Native American, and her friend has all these stereotypes what an Indian is. And I like to think the person up in the left-hand corner might be Chief Osceola. So I'm showing one of my biases and prejudices there. Go Knowles. So anyway, this is just a little thing about stereotypes. Okay. And again, we talked about defining implicit bias. Let me see. Automatic associations. Next slide. How do we measure bias? Let's see. Next slide. One of the ways we measure bias is the implicit association test. It was first designed by Harvard. It's now called Project Implicit. How many people have taken it? Not that many. Well, the beauty of this test is it's free and it's anonymous. So you can know yourself without having to worry about it showing up on Facebook or LinkedIn. So I would encourage all of you to take at least one subtest. They even have subtests for mental illness. They have subtests for a lot of the isms that we were talking about earlier. But the good thing about it is that you can take it and you know, again, we all, almost, you know, the majority, even more than the majority of us in the legal field really feel like we are not racist and prejudiced. We work hard, we take an oath. We're not going to discriminate. But we need to take this test so we know what we have to work around in terms of our implicit biases. We might have to work harder. So Project Implicit is actually based upon the Stroop test, which you guys took earlier. The test is called Implicit Association Test. It measures our subconscious ability to associate characteristics such as race with qualities such as smart or violent. You can take the test or use it with your family or your friends or your coworkers by going to the Project Implicit website. Implicit bias is a normal part of our society's psychological makeup, but it is pervasive. Judges from 3 different federal districts were given the IAT. They agreed to be part of a study. 87.1% of white judges showed implicit preferences for white people, and only 42.2% of black judges showed implicit preference for black people. So that was a test conducted in 2009 by a researcher by the name of Rocklinski. So that was interesting. What does the IAT tell us? Let's see, next slide. Okay, it's not a DNA test. There's been a lot of criticisms of it, so it's not a perfect test. It's not like, you know, you prick your finger, you put it on a piece of paper, and they know for sure, yes, you are, and no, you aren't. But it's a tool to help us understand ourselves and help us develop objective ways to work with what we bring to the equation. Next slide. There are other measurements, but I'm not sure Blue Cross Blue Shield covers them. You can have an MRI. They've done MRI imaging to determine what part of the brain is stimulated. In the fear we were talking about earlier, white people often show that the fear part of the amygdala is activated by images of black male faces. So in 2005, scientists used MRIs to test the brain's psychology, as I just discussed. Yet these same people who showed fear and their amygdala was stimulated said they had no awareness of bias or prejudice towards other people and had no idea that these measurable reactions were happening in their brains at the time they're being tested. So again, implicit bias is produced by unconscious processing of stereotypes. It's not present if an individual believes and takes actions showing that all people are treated fairly. It can be measured by self-reports. Oh goodness, that was a test I was supposed to give to you. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so now we're running out of time, so we're gonna have to skip some of the fun stuff. Everybody, what do you see? Okay, this is a mind bender. All right, so again, you know, what we're saying is we can't always trust our mind, we have to work. We have to work harder. With the Stroop test, if I had run all of those numbers really slowly, you all would have gotten the answers correct. But whenever we rush, like a rush to judgment, we're liable to have implicit bias come in as kind of an automatic response to a situation. And again, you guys who are in criminal, man, when I was in criminal, my dockets were horrible. And if I really took time to sit and get to know people and talk to the victims and talk to the witnesses, the bailiffs would have gone out on strike because they just wanted to, as my PD used to say, move the meat. I'm sure your PDs don't say that, but they'd say, let's make a deal, move the meat. So that's when you have to be careful of implicit biases kicking in, when you're just trying to rush through a docket. Okay, next. Okay, we talked about this. Next. We all judge. If you looked at the guy on the left and you didn't watch TV, you'd say, oh, I'll give that guy a ride. If you looked at the guy on the right, you'd say, I'm not going to give him a ride if he's out hitchhiking, when in fact, you'd be dead if you gave Ted Bundy a ride. He's not trustworthy. But Charlie Manson, he didn't do his own killing. He manipulated other people to do it for him. So we all judge. We all judge, right? But we need to be careful how we judge. Next. All right, again, IAT scores are a better prediction of behavior than explicit attitudes. White judges with greater implicit bias against blacks were harsher on defendants when primed. And I know that we're right here next to Sarasota, and I know there's a lot of controversy about the statistics and the data, and I'm not getting into that today because I don't have all the facts either. But what we can take out of that article is a desire to do better and to keep statistics that are reliable so we can test ourselves and say, am I being fair and I being unbiased? So the IAT is a reliable predictor. Okay, next. What can we do? And like I said, I hate going to seminars where they get you upset, but they don't tell you what you can do. You can do something. And there's a lot of different things. And again, on this gender committee that I'm on, we talk about designing systems that are the workaround, the detour around our implicit bias and our prejudice. So there are things that we can do. And we're going to move forward here. Again, we talked about this. Techniques, education, the diversity awareness, the cultural competency that we did early on is useful, but it's only part of it. We have to develop checklists for ourselves. We need to expose ourselves to different groups. We need to review our organizational behavior. If you read some of the literature, face-to-face interviews are the least reliable way of predicting future success. How do we pick our judges? We have to develop objective ways to see whether or not somebody is talented or somebody we want to hire. If you're going to hire an appellate judge, look at their writings, right? You know, because whenever you have a face-to-face interview, then your bias and prejudice are going to kick in. Professor Bonnet said, I think she is a behavioral economist, and she was hiring somebody for her department, and a gal came in who was a synchronized swimmer. And she said, well, this is really a good person. And she discovered that all of a sudden, kind of like in a Disney movie, that resume started to kind of glimmer and shine. And she said, wait a minute, I'm a synchronized swimmer. I think she's better qualified. I'm asking her better questions because I like her. But that's not an objective way to decide who really would make the best behavioral economist. So you have to put in systems. You have to look at what you're doing to try to de-bias your courtroom, de-bias your law firm, de-bias your organization. And again, reducing load helps a lot, so talk to your local legislative delegation. We need more judges so we can all get to know our people better and not have such heavy dockets. Okay, strategies, again, note-taking, develop criteria, create objective checks and balances for what you're doing. And next, you need to take your time. When I first moved to Florida, there was some little ditty people would say, red next to black, Jack better get back, red next to yellow won't hurt a fellow. But I could never keep it straight, so I just decided to stay away from all snakes that look like either of these guys, right? Right, so take your time. Don't stay away from all snakes, you know. Develop some criteria so you can take your time and you can do your job right, not just avoid sticky situations. Another thing, big deal, after I got to be a judge, we got a motto for my circuit. It was Justitia e recta, maybe? I don't know, we didn't have one before. And so the Supreme Court had one. Anybody know what it means? There's a big clue. Those of you who went to school and took Latin, it's kind of like, it's not real Latin, but supposedly Justice Adkins said in an opinion, what? Yeah. He said, their motto means sufficiently quickly if rightly, which I retranslated into soon enough if you get it right. So I think that subscribing to this principle in all that we do is right. So don't be in such a rush to get your cases done, get through your docket, that you don't do it right. Okay, empathy is important. We talked about that early on. Exercise mindfulness. Pause, don't blink. We had the Cook-Ross people came to our judges training a couple of years ago, and they gave us this handy way of remembering what we can do in terms of getting, back. So if you write down pause, understand other people's reactions, search for productive ways, execute an action plan. So this is just a handy way to kind of put together all of the things we've talked about today and developing some objective criteria to work around your implicit biases. All right, next. We had a federal judge, Judge Bernice Donald, came to our January diversity luncheon in Tampa. And she started out as a Shelby County judge in Memphis, Tennessee, and is now on the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals for the federal court. She said, I don't know, will it play? See if it will play. Can you make it full screen? Yeah. Do you guys see what's happening there? From the front, it looks one-dimensional. From the side, it's actually not. Anyway, this is supposed to illustrate what Judge Donald told us. The first day she took the bench, she was the first African-American judge in Shelby County, Tennessee, which is a majority African-American people. City of Memphis, majority African-American people, yet when she took the bench, she was the first African-American judge, and they all loved her. She'd been a legal aid attorney, and they said, we're going to make her feel really welcome. So when she showed up for work the first day, she had a black clerk, a black court reporter, all black bailiffs. They had made an effort that she would feel at home. And she said, you know, she contacted the clerk of court and said, you know, I really appreciate it. I know you love me, and I really appreciate the effort you went to, but I intend on being a judge for all people. all people. And she said even to this day in the federal staff that she hires diverse people because she said, I need people to help me see around my blind spots. So you need to make sure in your daily walk that you have people around you to help you see around your blind spots. Okay.
Judge Isom, we're going to have you join the panel now.
Okay,
Yeah.
so thank you everybody for listening, and now we'll have our panel. Thank you.
All right, go ahead and have a seat. I'm going to be right here.
Okay.
In the time that we have, we're going to have a brief panel discussion. The title of this panel discussion is Inclusion, How Do We Get There? But I would like to start off, because I think this is one of the primary concerns that many people have when we discuss diversity and inclusion, is why is diversity important in the legal profession? And I'm going to ask Attorney Perez and the Honorable Hill Harvey if they could weigh in on that. Why is this an important topic for the legal profession?
It's important. It's important because we need inclusion. We need to not be. Can you not hear me? We need inclusion. We need to not be forgiven or forgotten. For instance, even though we talk about diversity today, has anybody followed up? Is there a tracking system that shows success in it? We need to not just hire people just to hire them to maintain or get quotas. You need to be able to follow through on whether or not they're trained, whether or not they're successful, whether or not you're mentoring them, whether or not you're including them. They're not invisible. And you could talk about women, how many partners, there are male partners in a firm, but then you don't put the female attorneys on the track for partnership. I mean, we can go on and on and on with regards to it, but it's important because in order for there to be a change, we all have to input. We have to give input. We have to go out in the community. We have to get involved in politics. We have to get involved in organizations and associations. We have to be involved. And you don't need to be passive and let someone else do, and put your head in the sand and let somebody else do.
Okay.
Again, my name is Alan Perez. For those of you who don't know me, I work with the Millard Law Firm in Sarasota. We are lawyers and judges, and I think that we comprise one of the highest, in my opinion, echelons of society, that being that we get to represent people and we get to judge people when they are wronged, and we get to, as judges, determine their fates, as lawyers advocate for those people, and there have been many strides that we've made that I can see in reading and hearing and watching to overcome the biases, to overcome things that in my opinion, held us back. And so we're in a different time in 2017, but I think that there's still ground to be made up, that we haven't advanced, I think, as much as we could. And I think there are still things that we have to consider when we represent to the public that we, as one of these highest echelons of society, are there to serve the public. We're there to serve you, and we're there to serve and judge you fairly. I think that one of the reasons why this is my third term on the Supreme Court's Standing Committee on Diversity and Inclusion is because what's important to me is the perception of the public of the court system. And because I think that even though it's 2017, perception is a significant part of people's lives.
And I'm going to ask Judge Isom, what are some of the things that you have noticed about the education of the judiciary and what we're trying to teach judges, both old judges and new judges, about this subject? And how are we responding to it as a judiciary?
Well, I think everybody seems to be usually very positive about it, but like I said, we've moved beyond just doing the cultural competency and the diversity awareness. I think those of us on the committee and in other, I guess, educational capacities are concerned about the next step, about how are we going to objectively say that we're actually learning these lessons? How are we going to take the lessons home? We don't want to just be doing this for a feel-good thing. We want to be able to say at the end of the day that processes were put into place to address any concerns about implicit bias on the bench.
One of the things that it's hard to convince law firms, and I guess I'm directing this at Attorney Perez, is why is diversity and inclusion good for business? Why is it important from just a financial standpoint, taking away the moral issue? Why is it important that diversity be something that law firms and lawyers should embrace from a business point of view?
Well, I do speak Spanish, so I can offer that. I think it opens up certainly my firm and myself to a segment of people. I say that half jokingly that I speak Spanish, but you know, being 100% of my heritage is Mexican, I can relate in a way that people in our legal community, most people can't, to, you know, that culture. And I think that it's not only, you know, hiring people who speak other languages, but hiring somebody who can attest to this is a different culture. It's a different way of thinking. And you know, growing up with my very Mexican grandmother in the house gave me kind of a perspective that I feel I can bring to this profession.
Would you like to add to that?
Well, with regards to that,
Get the mic a little closer.
Because I've traveled the world, been to Africa many, many times. For instance, you want to be able to have people comfortable with you. You also want to be able to bring business in, but you don't want to shy business away. There's an issue with regards to people of color. They want to feel comfortable. They want to know whether or not you're going to represent them because you're good and not just because you're white or you're black. So you need to be able to make them feel comfortable and not just shy away from those types of cases that, for instance, if you have a case where you have a rape victim, do you want the male partner to represent the victim, or do you want a female partner to represent the victim? Was that person black? Was that person white? Who was the defendant? You need to think about all of those things and the biases that come in with that. But people want to know that you're going to protect their interests. And that more importantly, I would think that the real ideal judges should represent the community. They should be all kinds of black, gender, more women, and so forth, in order to make sure that there's a fair, just system. It won't look like it's impartial, yes. It makes you comfortable, and it also, you'll have some commonality with it. And the more you get involved in the community, whether it be at Booker High, teaching English or people how to write, or doing moot court, or those kinds of things, or different things in Newtown or different other areas, it'll make you feel more comfortable. Have you ever gone to a supermarket in a different area than where you would normally shop to see different people? Have you done that? Have you taken your children and let them see you do the same thing? You have to take the hand of somebody to be able to show them that you're not just putting your head in the sand. Because you can have change, but you have to be able to have change if everybody works on it.
And I think that's the answer to the question of this panel, inclusion, how do we get there? And in the few minutes that we have left, I'd ask the Honorable Claudia Isom and Attorney Perez to also answer that question, or attempt to answer that question. In their opinion, how do we get there? Judge Isom, I'll start with you.
Well, I kind of feel like I've been hogging the platform here, but I think, as I said, the diversity awareness is just one part of it. Familiarity, designing systems where we can objectively test ourselves and test the quality of our decisions is a big part of taking the next step. And you know, all of these design type of things are designed to be objective, to take the subjective out of our decision-making process. And So how do we get there? We have to work hard. We have to work very hard, because just think, we've got hundreds of years of all of these feelings and systems developing in our country that we have to figure out a good way to make everybody feel like, not just feel like, perceive justice, but to also receive justice.
Okay, and then I will ask Attorney Perez to give his thoughts.
One of the efforts that the Standing Committee, the Supreme Court Standing Committee on Diversity has undertaken is to go to the law schools and talk to law students about this awesome responsibility that we all have. And I know Judge Isom and I, we've spoken to the students at Stetson. We've gone to Nova. We have plans in the works to hit every law school in the state, and we're going to, at least the way I expect it to go, we're going to continue that and cycle those through. I think it's incumbent on each and every one of us and before I say this, I think it's important to recognize that our time is so much more valuable than just throwing money at something. You know, for instance, I am a coach at the Booker High School Law Academy for their mock trial competition. That's just one small thing that is just an example of showing these kids who are high school students that someone like me can be a lawyer, and someone like me can, you know, can get past some of these disadvantages that I know that we all, you know, have to face. And so it's really the time that to me is most important in putting that time into an effort like this. To me is just critical.
I wanted to throw in here. When I was on the Florida Bar Standing Committee on Professionalism, we were presented with the study results of the gender, the women in the law study, and we said, well, take a look around the table. If you don't have a diverse a group of people sitting around the table, then we're all just using our imaginations on how this is going to happen. So if you're part of a group, or part of a planning group that's planning an educational program or planning some kind of initiative, make sure that your group also represents all of the talents of the people in your organization, not just the same old group of people that's, I guess, willing to do.
Okay, with that in our time, I'm going to ask Lori Dorman to come up. I want to thank our panelists, the Honorable Claudia Isom, the Honorable Karima Hill-Harvey, and Alan Perez. I want to thank Manatee Educational Television for recording this, and I will return the mic to Lori Dorman.
And I promise not to cry this time. So 2 weeks ago, I went to get a manicure in Sarasota. I had my phone at the Apple store, and I had to wait and wait and wait. And rather than spending money at the mall, I said, well, I'll just get a manicure. And I sat down, and a guy from John started doing my manicure. We started talking, and he says, where are you from? I'm from Southern California. And he says, well, I'm from Pasadena. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I went to UCLA. And we're talking about the difference between living in Florida and living in California. And I said, well, it's so much nicer to live here. So we don't have the traffic that they have in California. We don't have the crowds that they have in California. And the people here are so nice. And he put my hand down, and he crossed his arms, and he said, yeah, you think that because you're white. I'm Asian. And they're not nice. And that stunned me. And we had a long talk. The rest of the manicure was not about growing up in Southern California. The rest of the manicure was talking about how he had been treated and the things that people said to him because he happened to be Asian. And I thought, I need to invite you to our seminar. And he said, no, I'm working, but thank you. But the point was that it had never crossed my mind. And I think of myself, as those of you who know me, as somebody who's pretty liberal and open-minded and who tries not to see color or race or gender. And it just never crossed my mind that not everybody experiences the world the same way that I do or the same way that you all do. And so if you take one thing from this seminar, is that you think just a moment about the shoes of the other person that you're meeting and where it is that they're coming from and what it is that they're feeling, and try to think about ways to make them feel better and more comfortable. And I close things with John as he finished up my manicure by saying, not everybody thinks the way that those people think. And there are a lot of people who are really happy that you're here, and I'm one of them. So I'm really happy that you all are here. There will be many, many more diversity programs coming. We are excited that we have this committee. There is a program on Monday, March 6th in Sarasota. They're going to be talking about diversity and why the economy, your personal economy, is helped by improving diversity. We'll be getting a notice from the MCBA about that later this week. And I just want to thank you all very much for coming. So thank you. Thank you so much.